If I'm Canada, I'm nervous. If I'm Europe, I'm nervous
Yeah, yeah, he's
because
coming after Europe and the EU next,
yeah,
no doubt.
because what he's saying is, I don't accept the status quo. We've told ourselves for years that we're magnanimous and we're good guys and we'll take the blood. But he's saying an $80 billion a month trade deficit is not tolerable. Where everybody else was fine with it. If it went to 100, that's okay too. We don't really care. He's not going to accept that, and he's going to do things to turn that around.
Not only that, and as we spoke with you last week about funding of NATO and all the other funding that we do globally, he's saying, I've had enough. You guys got to kick in.
Well, you see this whole thing about Greenland. Denmark now has thrown $2 billion
Right,
towards Greenland security, and that's really what he wants.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So
See,
he's using tariffs as he's really not so much using tariffs as he's using access to the American consumer.
yeah.
That's the issue. It's coded in tariffs and money and revenue and all of that. But really, he's saying if you want to reach the American consumer, you got to play ball with.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Markets and Madness. As we say, this is the place where we discuss what happens, the madness that occurs when economics, politics, and personalities all move in different directions. We've certainly had that this weekend, and it did lead to a lot of madness this morning. So, having followed the markets for the last, I guess, 12 hours or so, we've got some interesting times ahead. What are you thinking, Tim?
Thinking that a couple of weeks ago we were talking about, I think we said it's better to miss a boat than get on one that sinks. And we were talking about hiding out in the
Right.
fixed income world. And I guess I didn't do enough of it. I took some strategic positions to cover a lot of the stuff I own. But of course, when you're wrong too big. When you're right, you don't have enough.
Always the way. Yep.
So, but I think energy is a real interesting play here. And, I guess you got to start off with the tariffs. This is not a black swan. It's more of a gray swan. We knew it was coming.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's long term lasting, but I think he's going to pull them off gradually. You know, I see some improvement on the border from Panama, maybe from Mexico. I think the negotiations, well, one thing at a time, I suppose. Mexico has got a lot to lose. Canada, Trudeau's still involved here, but he's a lame duck, isn't he?
He is. I think the election is probably 4 to 6 weeks away. But his number one, Pulivar, who's going to be who's the odds-on favorite to win. He seems to want to fight back pretty aggressively as well.
Well, this is Trudeau's chance to look better at the end of his term. He wants to take a strong stance, buy Canadian. I'm going to stand up to the U.S. And that's the danger here. He could use this. Is he running again?
No, he's stepping down. He's walking away.
But he wants to go out in a blaze of glory, and his policies are going to be short term. But he could make this last a little longer than it should.
Well, I just read before we came on that Trump's going to speak to him this afternoon. So they're going to have a sit down, discuss what the real problems are. A few things that I've been reading over the last, I guess, 8 hours or so. There's some thought that since Trudeau really stepped on Trump's neck while he was down for the last 4 years, this is Trump's way of getting back, right? Like this is the petulant child who said, "All right, you threw me in the corner and you didn't think I was coming back. Now I'm back and I'm going to make your life miserable." The other side of the coin, I saw something that was interesting, is Trump keeps saying the border is very porous. You're not doing enough on the border. And Trudeau's saying, no, border is very strong. Yet he's allocating another $1.3 billion to border security. Um, if it was so secure, what do you need to add so much in terms of the next step? So we'll see.
Well, from this, action on the border is not really a big deal. Mexico is different than Mexico. When you cross the Mexico loves to see people cross the border because it means foreign exchange going back to them. People come in, generate money, and send it back.
At home, yeah.
Not so true with Canada. Canada is more of a trade issue. than it is a political border issue.
Hmm.
The border is kind of pesky, and they don't want to be seen as catering to Trump and responding so quickly to Trump. And Trudeau now, I mean, let's face it, Trudeau's a lame duck, and all he's concerned about at this point is really his image. His policy is not going to be long lasting. If I'm Canada, I'm nervous. If I'm Europe, I'm nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
Because,
coming after Europe and the EU next,
yeah,
no doubt.
because what he's saying is, I don't accept the status quo. You know, we've told ourselves for years that we're magnanimous and we're good guys and we'll take the blood. But he's saying an $80 billion a month trade deficit is not tolerable. Everybody else was fine with it. If it went to 100, that's okay too. We don't really care. He's not going to accept that, and he's going to do things to turn that around.
Not only that, and as we spoke with you last week about funding of NATO and all the other funding that we do globally, he's saying, I've had enough. You guys got to kick in.
Well, you see this whole thing about Greenland. Denmark now has thrown $2 billion towards Greenland security, and that's really what he wants.
Right.
So
See,
he's using tariffs as he's really not so much using tariffs as he's using access to the American consumer. That's the issue. It's coded in tariffs and money and revenue and all of that. But really, he's saying if you want to reach the American consumer, you got to play ball with. If I'm Canada, I'm nervous. If I'm Europe, I'm nervous.
yeah. Yeah. He's
Because,
coming after Europe and the EU next,
yeah,
no doubt.
because what he's saying is, I don't accept the status quo. You know, we've told ourselves for years that we're magnanimous and we're good guys and we'll take the blood. But he's saying an $80 billion a month trade deficit is not tolerable. Where everybody else was fine with it. If it went to 100, that's okay too. We don't really care. He's not going to accept that, and he's going to do things to turn that around.
Not only that, and as we spoke with you last week about funding of NATO and all the other funding that we do globally, he's saying, I've had enough. You guys got to kick in.
Well, you see this whole thing about Greenland. Denmark now has thrown $2 billion
Right.
towards Greenland security, and that's really what he wants.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
See,
he's using tariffs as he's really not so much using tariffs as he's using access to the American consumer.
yeah.
That's the issue. It's coded in tariffs and money and revenue and all of that. But really, he's saying if you want to reach the American consumer, you got to play ball with me.
And there's, a lot of things that I've read, as I read this morning, the doom and gloomers. That's it. Car prices are going up. Grocery prices are going up. Yeah. And I think he's admitted to that. We're going to see that short term. But I don't think it's going to be a long-term effect. I think it's going to resolve itself. As we've said here a number of times, you're going to see American products start to fill that gap.
Well, it kind of reminds me of a married couple when a marriage is on the rocks. And the guy, you don't want, now let me use a different analogy. What our trading partners do not want is for America to get used to living without their goods. I mean, there's a transition period where you miss the cheap imports, but gradually you learn to live with the situation. And they don't want this to go on long enough for the American consumer to learn to live with the situation. And the other thing it opens up is competitive pressures from competing trading partners. Take China. What China does not want to see is the Prime Minister of India getting on the phone to Trump and saying, what can we do here? Where can we fill some gaps? And the longer this goes on, the more likely that is to happen. So I don't think this is going to last very long at all. I think in a month's time, we're not going to be talking about this. I don't think. So if that means fade the market, yeah, I guess it does. Fade the market.
And where does it leave the dollar?
Dollar is, I've been bullish on the dollar for capital flows.
Yeah.
And I still think people looking for a sell-off, the dollar might stop going up. I don't see.
Well, this morning we saw the euro lower. We saw the pound slightly lower. While Canada was stronger, I didn't look at dollar max. I should have. But dollar yen is lower. Gold is much higher. Gold is up another $30 or something. So it's not really a dollar play to me because we do have, it's dollars weaker against the yen, dollar stronger against weaker against the yen, stronger against the euro, stronger against the Canada, but weaker against gold.
When you tell me that the carry trade is over in yen, I'll pay attention to yen as a pure foreign exchange move. But right now, the carry trade is the dominant factor. And unless that relationship changes, that interest rate relationship changes, which I don't see happening. But you
But the
got a great
BOJ did
carry
raise
trade.
rates the other day. I mean, slightly, but
Yeah.
there was a,
But the move goes from a really great carry trade to a good carry trade.
yeah,
It never really gets to a neutral carry trade.
yeah,
So when that changes, then you can look at the yen against the dollar and say, okay, it's a pure foreign exchange move.
that's a
But that
viable, yeah.
dislocation drives everything.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And it's been for so long, you get used to the carry trade, but I guess there are, trillions of dollars bet on it globally.
Yeah, that's the status quo.
I did see the TSX this morning. Toronto Stock Exchange was down 2.5% or so. Much like our markets, all the major indexes seem to be down between 1.5 and 2% or so.
Well, if he were going to make this move, let's just isolate Canada for a second. If he were going to make this move against Canada, I would argue that he would probably have waited until such time as we were pulling more oil out of the ground and gas until he got drill baby
Right.
drill underway. So, of course, right now those supplies are going to be tight. But the border is such an issue that he's using this primarily for the border with Canada, with respect to Canada. Now, that's something that Canada could fix in an hour. Trudeau could call him up and say, you know what, I'm going to do something about the border. Mexico can do that too. And is that going to change the thing? No, he'll say, all right, I'm going to go from 10% to 5%.
Well, from 25 to 10,
25 to 10.
25% to
Yeah,
10%.
sorry, I had China in mind for some
Yeah.
reason. So he's not going to take his foot off the neck very quickly. But he does have this juggling act with respect to energy. It's going to take a while to get drill baby drill off the ground. And maybe that's what he needs to get the Democrats on board.
Well,
I
they're going
don't
to
know.
fight him every step, right?
Yeah.
I did see that Rubio was down in Panama, and the Panamanians have rescinded the agreement that they had with China
The
on,
Silk Road.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big step.
That is, and the other one's going to be the Darien Gap. He's got to put
Has
a
been
stop
an
on the Darien.
amazing 2 weeks. It's just been 2 weeks. It's
Yeah.
warp speed. The
And
things
you
that
know
are
what?
moving.
When he was in Los Angeles, what I think was the most interesting thing there was that mayor of Los Angeles he's saying, look, let the people get the stuff, let them clean up their houses. And the mayor said, well, I took emergency powers. They can do it in a week. And he said, what about a week? A week's a long time. Let's do it tonight. And this is what he's doing on the border. He's saying, look, I don't want to, you tell me, okay, we got a meeting scheduled for March. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to wait till March. Do some changes now. I want to see some, in the next 24 hours, I want to see some real results. Or I'm going to go from 25 to 50. That's what he's doing. Uh, Anybody who's dealt on the higher levels of the corporate world, an entrepreneur and somebody, a mover and shaker, gets frustrated with the time delays that are imposed unnecessarily.
Bureaucracy that's inherent in our government.
Yeah, the whole world, probably worse in Europe than here.
Yeah.
But I mean, how many stories, how many guys that said, yeah, I got a meeting scheduled with so and so. When is it? It's in March, but we're in January. Trump, that's intolerable for him, particularly on the border. When fentanyl's coming through the border, he made some promises. His promises had time delays in them. He's not going to tolerate these time delays. And he's going to look like an impatient child but he's doing what has to be done. And people don't want to take this medicine right away.
That's it. Yeah. That's so true. What he's done with did you see that they're closing down, what is it, USIAD, International Aid?
Yeah, right.
All these NGOs,
Yeah.
closing them, just shut them down. Shut
So
them
now
down.
he pulled the security permits for guys like Bolton. I don't want these
Yeah,
people doing any more damage.
yeah.
Stop it, you know?
Stop them tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the key difference between him and the bureaucrat politicians.
Career politicians. Yeah.
Yeah. They're used to, well, getting results in a month is unrealistic. This is going to take 2 quarters. He doesn't have 2 quarters. He's got a report card coming in 2 years, and he doesn't have Congress on his. He doesn't have the Democrats on his side. So his actions are going to look impetuous, but the sooner they recognize that his time frame is different than everybody else's time frame. It's a really interesting experience to watch this, because I don't think we've ever seen a president demand action this quickly. Even
Yeah.
Reagan. Even Reagan.
Yeah, really, it has been amazing. The speed, as I say, it's been 2 weeks. And think about all the things that he's done in the last 2 weeks. It's just,
In his head, if you can bore into Trump's brain, which admittedly is a bizarre place, in his head, this should have been done 4 years ago. So I'm not going to wait another 5 minutes.
right.
This should have been here 4 years ago. In his brain, the election was stolen from me, and they've delayed my actions for 4 years. I'm not going to let him delay another 5 minutes. And he's given that message to his whole staff. Rubio is in Panama doing deals already.
Right. I saw Christy Nome was at the border on horseback
Yeah.
with the D.
These people haven't had time to change their suits. The suits haven't gone to the cleaners and back. They're still wearing the same stuff. Yeah, it's an experience. What does it do in
Yeah.
terms of markets? It means options volatility grows exponentially.
Yeah. So ultimately, if this is going to last a month, do you fade this move in Canada? Do you buy Canadian stocks? Do you buy the TSX? Do you buy the Canadian dollar?
I don't think we're in that world anymore where you can just buy a blanket of stocks or an ETF of the whole market. This market has become sector sensitive.
Hmm.
What's good for a sector is not necessarily good for the whole market. You got to treat the energy sector as its own animal. And within the energy sector, you got to treat the product separate from the drillers and everybody else, I think. That trade hasn't worked because they're still moving in tandem with one another. But I'm a believer that the drillers and the shippers are good long term. If I had to take a position, if you put a gun to my head, I would buy natural gas and sell oil within that sector. Natural gas
Right.
burns cleaner, and that's an easier sell.
But I'm just thinking in terms of Canada itself. If this is going to blow over, if Canada is going to capitulate and do something on the border, are there opportunities there within the TSX? Do you see that coming to?
Question. If you were in Canada right now and you're in a position of power, you have two choices. You can fight the guy, or you could look for a win-win situation.
Yeah, and I think fight the guy means scream and yell, but go back channel and say we're going to solve this, and these are the things that we're going to do.
Well, you got the lame duck here, which changed the equation.
Yeah, but you still have the premiers of all the provinces that are speaking out as well, taking American liquor off the shelves in Ontario, things like that.
Yeah, and they don't want to see a Buy America versus a Buy Canada. See that. And they don't want American consumers to get used to other stuff. That's the real issue. The longer this lasts, the more they're going to replace us with something else. We have a franchise intact here. We got to protect our franchise.
That's why I think when Trudeau announced that he was resigning, stepping down, calling for the new election, I thought it was an opportunity to buy Canada. Still think it's an opportunity to buy Canada. What we've seen happen in Argentina, the anti-woke global faction coming around, Canada's getting beaten up now, but I think ultimately you buy the Canadian dollar. It's got natural resources. This is an opportunity to me. If dollar Canada's at 145, 146, I think we could see it back to 138. once this is all resolved and we have the new prime minister in place that's going to work with the U.S., be anti-woke, so to speak, and help grow it like we've seen Milei do in Argentina and Trump's trying to do here.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. The only problem Canada has is that short term, their energy exports to us matter a lot. Well, over time, they're going to matter less and less as drill baby drill comes online. So that's the issue with that Canada has to defend against. And
They
energy
still
prices,
have energy, right?
sorry.
They still have energy.
Yeah, and energy prices have a long way to go before they get to a level to discourage drilling. You got to get oil down to $40 a barrel before wellers start to say, you know what, it's cheaper to import it than to.
Hmm.
And when it gets down to 20, they start to cap the drills, and that puts them on a shelf for a year or so. We're a long way from that. You got to cut energy prices in half before that becomes an issue. So Canada's got a lot of room to come along and say, all right, I'm going to stimulate exports to you, cheap exports to you here. I'm going to take action on the border. Let's put a joint task force together on the border. Now, with respect to Mexico, Mexico has way more to lose than Canada. Mexico lives off of the remnants of NAFTA.
Right.
All of a sudden, you start stopping the trucks coming across the border and saying, you might have fentanyl. So pull over there and spend a week, and I'm going to take this truck apart and see what's going on. And all of a sudden, trade drops down to nothing. The beans are rotting on the shelves, and the corn is not coming any place.
But do you think there's an opportunity for Canada, for China to move in at that point and work with the Mexicans on our border?
No, no, not while the only problem I see is whether or not the cartel owns the government. We tend to look at cartels as criminals and
Right.
odd players, but these cartels are governments now. I'll never forget it's around 1972, 74, and I started my relationship with Jeff started to grow, and I got to really know him. I knew very few people who were born in Palestine and were Egyptian and knew the Middle East and lived in Lebanon. And I kept reading about the PLO, and I thought the PLO was like the splinter group, and I wondered why the Lebanese, which was a formal government, and I said to Jeff one time, if the Lebanese government fielded an army, couldn't they take out the PLO? I mean, isn't that a gnat compared to? And he said, no, not at all. PLA is much more powerful. And that's the way these cartels are. I mean, these are really mini governments. They got submarines and they're guerrillas. And you start a war with the cartel, it's going to be a bloody war. And Trump has started it. So
Right.
we're going to see it. We're going to see border skirmishes now like we've never seen. And Mexico, the question is whether or not the Mexican, not so much the president, although probably that too, but the political machine, to what extent has it been ensnared by the cartel? And that's your border deal there. You're negotiating, whether or not you realize it, you're negotiating with the cartel as well as the Mexican government. So this is not a simple task. I mean, how much has the cartel gained by a weak border and fentanyl exports and human trafficking? These are huge numbers. They rival Mexican GDP, I bet.
I guess it was the Colombian government that took out the Colombian cartels and moved them all to Mexico. I remember going to Colombia and Mexico City, Bogota and Mexico City 2 years ago, and talking to the people in Bogota saying, is it safe around here? They said, oh yeah. I said, what about the cartels? Oh no, they're all in Mexico now. And walking down a very fashionable street in this area in Mexico City, Polanco, beautiful. Strolling minstrels, restaurants, outdoor restaurants. And we were walking down a street with the people I was with, the group, and there was an auto showroom, car showroom, and they had it looked like a Mercedes that was all shot up, bullet holes in it, in the window of the car dealership. And I said to the guy, Javier, I said, Javier, what are they selling? He says, oh, no, they're selling bulletproof cars. You can't do that to their cars. So that's what's in Mexico now. But what I'm saying is it was Colombia no more. You
Okay, but
know,
you're strengthening my argument with respect to Mexico because essentially, you do a deal with the Mexican government, the cartel has to be sitting at the table at some level. And we're not negotiating directly with the cartels. And the cartels, they can't say, okay, I'm going to reduce the amount of fentanyl and I'll do this and I'll give you that. No, remember Vivek in that
Friedman
podcast,
podcast. Yep.
yeah, where he said, when you got two issues, it's either a plus or a minus or it's black or white, you can't resolve a problem easily. But if there's a lot of moving parts, you can give this for that and this for that. Well, there's not a lot of moving parts with the cartels. The cartels,
And
their position is, we're gonna bring stuff in, and if you don't like it, that's too bad. That's what's got to be. And they're at the table with the Mexican government to some extent. So
that's the
Mexico is a
fear
bigger
anyway.
issue than
Yeah,
Canada.
that's the fear. The Mexican government obviously is denying it, but that's the fear. And Trump highlighted them as terrorist organization. So now we're going in and going after them, just like you did with ISIS this weekend.
Yeah.
So if you cut off the head of the snake will slither around for a little bit, but eventually you'll get to the back of the tail.
Well, let me make a crazy statement here. It's almost better if the cartels own the government, because at least when negotiating with the government, you're negotiating with the cartels as well.
Yeah,
But if they're standalone, they're a thorn of your problem. You can't come to a deal. So who knows? Mexico is a whole different animal than Canada. Canada is more of a pure trade issue.
yeah, and for Mexico, for Americans vacationing, you got to take that off the list. You're not going to Mexico on vacation anytime soon. I would think that's going to be shut down.
Yeah, that's true. There's so many variables here. I mean, you got the China card, and then you got Panama, which the China card is a piece of, and you got the Darien Gap, which is the border, which Mexico is a piece of, and then you got Canada, and you got this whole issue that he's raised with the EU. And I mean, what does he want out of the EU? One of the components of a deal with the EU has to be, you guys are going to contribute more to your own defense. I want to see your defense budget go up to 5% of GDP instead of 2% or 3%. You're not even doing 2%, all of you now, and I want you to go to 5. And Denmark has been sensitive to that. Greenland made them sensitive to that. All right, now they're throwing $2 billion into defending Greenland. Okay, that's a start. Yeah, it's a confusing world.
Yeah,
But a few things are clear. One, he's not accepting the status quo. Two, he's not accepting the traditional timelines with respect to responses. If he runs into any delays, he's going to pull the trigger. And he's not afraid to pull the trigger. He's shown us that.
absolutely. Everybody's been saying all along this is a threat, this is negotiation. Well, negotiation, the rubber hit the road. We're here now.
Yeah. I'm going to start I'm going to change the clock. Whereas the clock was working in your favor, now the clock's working in my favor. He's done that. He's under the 2-minute warning now, I think.
Yeah. Another interesting thing is he's waiting on 3 more cabinet posts to be approved, and the Senate took off last week, right? Instead of Thune, who's now the majority leader in the Senate, just let them take off instead of voting on this. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to get these 3 nominations across.
Yeah.
I'm here down in South Carolina we were out with a couple of young mothers, let's call it, and they want RFK nominated. They want Make America Healthy Again. They want clean foods. They want, and that, the soccer moms of 10 or 20 years ago are now very supportive of the Democrat RFK to get this agenda across.
Yeah. Yeah. The nominees are, but he's got his cabinet. He's got the guts of his cabinet moving. And he's pulling
Right.
security clearances. He's shutting down. The big difference between now and 4 years ago was Twitter now belongs to Musk. And whereas his message was constrained and controlled,
Right.
now,
It's out there.
he's moved the media off the dime here. I read something about some quasi-permanent positions within the White House press room, where
Yes.
CBS and NBC.
NBC, NPR, New York Times have been removed, and he's putting Breitbart and a couple of other. And they said if you're a podcaster, I think I sent it to you saying we should apply. If you're a podcaster, you could get a seat at the White House press room. You get press credentials.
Yeah, yeah. The legacy media has been moved out, and he's talked about TikTok and the youth vote. Every time he mentions TikTok, he says, I got a weak spot for TikTok because they gave me the youth vote, so I want to do something about that. And to me, the legacy media doesn't reach the youth vote. I mean, every kid I know, I call kids, everybody under 35, they don't watch TV anymore. They take their computer with them and they go on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. So the legacy media belongs with previous generations. They're gone.
Right. The networks and the print media
Well,
is
print
gone.
media are dinosaurs waiting for the meteor to hit. No.
Yeah.
They're looking up at the sky saying, what the hell is that glowing rock?
Yeah.
They're out. And they're neutralized. But a lot of them have done a lot of work transforming themselves into new media companies. They all have
Yeah.
robust.
They focus on digital media. I saw the interview last night, Tucker and Pierce Morgan, and Tucker was talking to Pierce Morgan, saying you ran a couple of. She said you were in print media, and he said, yeah, I ran a couple of. I worked for 4 media newspaper companies, and I ran 2 of them. So what would you do now? He says I'd close down the print side of it. He said it'd all be digital. There's no point in having.
Yeah, the only market that buys my stuff is people who want to wrap fish.
He said it used to be that you would present the news in the morning. People would get their 2 or 3 newspapers, they'd read them through, and you would set the agenda. That agenda is gone. These people, before they're out of bed, they know what's going on in the world. They look at their phone and they see their.
That's one of the, I think, the benefits that we used to have because we read screens long before people read
Yeah,
screens.
yeah,
We had our own electronic media back in the 70s. And I remember reading the New York Times and taking a position and getting beat up and saying to myself, what the hell am I doing reading the Times? This is 2 days old, this news, you know? And I just threw away the newspapers completely and
yeah. The
stayed with
AP ticker.
electronic media.
We'd have the AP ticker on the desk,
There was a
and you see
time
it
when we
come
were
through.
ahead of the world.
Yeah,
Now the world's caught up with us.
yeah. The world is flat. I mean, and certainly in terms of information, you know, in terms of information, absolutely.
Well, all right. I think we're
Yeah,
done here.
what I'll just say is if you're still listening, if you're still watching, please subscribe. We do appreciate you coming on. Put your comments down below. Any thoughts you have about where we should take this, where we should bring it, please, your voice is heard. So come on through and help us grow this. But thanks, Tim. Anything else you want to add?
Now it's an interesting day. The market was down 600 when we started. Who the hell knows where
Yeah,
it's going to be now? But I think this is a short-term
I
phenomenon.
agree. I think it's going to put the U.S. in a different light very soon.
And the last
All
thing I
right.
want us to do is to get used to this.
Right. That's a good point.
You argue with your girlfriend. It's an argument. You're threatening to leave, to move out. You don't want them to open up an account on,
Yeah. Oh,
once they start getting used to life without you,
right.
it is well and truly over. And I don't think our trading partners want to see that.
That's a good ending note. All
Okay,
right. Have a great day. Hit them straight.
take care.